Alright, so it's been a while since I've done one of these Q&As, but I do still intend to start doing them more often, maybe once every couple of weeks, and I figure if I still want it to happen, I might as well try to get back in the groove of things by doing another one of these. We're going to be looking at just a few questions today, because I have one really long one to start out with. I don't remember who sent me this question, so I apologize. I've been sitting on this one for a long time, and I do not remember who you are. So if you are the person who left this question, and you see me answering it here, please let me know, because I feel really bad for forgetting you. This was in reference to another post that I had made on my Tumblr, and I don't remember what that was, but the context isn't super important, so it doesn't matter. A thought just occurred to me, and now I'm going nuts. In the scene, that being that flashback scene, not only is she clearly surrounded by Jaspers, but they are all copies of our Jasper, orange, complete with a helmet and nose gem. But then, immediately afterward, she's poofed by what we assume to be our bismuth because she has the same chest gem. But if our bismuth was bubbled by rose quartz early on, and the betas didn't pop out until after halfway through the war, then there's no way that our bismuth could have been there anywhere near any of the betas. Which means there's a missing piece of information, or a misleading piece. One, the bismuth in Lapis's flashback is not our bismuth. Obviously this is possible, we've seen gems of the same type with the same gem placement, but by narrative logic, it's suspicious. Two, the Jaspers in the flashback aren't Jaspers, even though they clearly are. Since Stephen is the one who's listening to Lapis's story, it's possible we're seeing his interpretation of it. At the time, the only homeworld quartz he's ever been exposed to is our Jasper, thus all enemy quartz in his mind look like her, but by this logic, Stephen should not have been able to clearly depict who is obviously bismuth, as he had not met her yet. How do you imagine a gem he's never seen? If I'm not mistaken, Lapis was showing that to Stephen in the reflection of the eyes. Three, there's something very wrong with the timeline. Four, Lapis lied about something. I don't know if there was originally supposed to be a fifth point there or not, or if you just typed that out of habit, but that's basically the end of the question. I've been wondering about this too, and the best answer I can come up with is they must have retconned something. First of all, while those are clearly quartz soldiers, I'm not sure that they're clearly Jaspers. There could be other orange quartz that we just don't know about. They're also very obviously not meant to be our Jasper, they're just palette swaps of the quartz soldiers that showed up in the flashback and the answer as well. Which, if you remember, was something that while Garnet was describing it, Stephen was imagining in his head. That's why, even though he clearly had Blue Diamond described to him, some of the details were wrong when we finally saw her later. So either it's laziness on the part of the crew, where they just reused those character models without changing them to be more appropriate to something that Stephen was literally being shown, or originally more quartz were supposed to look like that, more Jaspers were supposed to look like that. But then eventually it was retconned that they looked different. And because I don't think that those character models for the quartzes are entirely accurate, I still don't think we have ever seen two gems of the same type with the same gem placement. So I still do think that this is our bismuth in this shot. I still do think that she is the one who poofed Lapis. I just think the background elements in this were poorly chosen. As for whether or not there's a problem with the timeline, let's say that those were originally meant to be Jaspers, even in the answer when we saw them there as well. And let's assume that Garnet said to Stephen that Blue Diamond had Jaspers in her entourage, that she literally used that term, that she said Jaspers, and that's why Stephen imagined them looking so much like Jasper. That alone proves that it doesn't really matter if bismuth is shown alongside Jaspers, because Jaspers didn't just come from the Beta Kindergarten. Somewhere on some other planet before the war even started, somebody else must have made some Jaspers. As the events of the answer take place before the war even started in the first place, and we know the Beta Kindergarten was rushed into creation specifically because of the war. So to kind of summarize, I think the timeline is still perfectly fine. I don't think this specifically contradicts the timeline. I just think the crew made a mistake in what background objects they chose to include here. Or it's a retcon, one or the other. Either way, I think there's enough evidence elsewhere to either invalidate those as being Jaspers, or else discredit them as an accurate depiction of any character. Also, keep in mind, if they are Jaspers from the Beta Kindergarten, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to begin with, as in terms of their proportions and their stature, they do resemble Jasper, the Jasper character that we've seen in the show many times. And we know for a fact that she is the only Jasper that came out of the ground in the Beta Kindergarten that looked like that. Hence, if these are Jaspers, they must have come from somewhere else, and again, it doesn't matter if bismuth was seen with them, it doesn't mess up the timeline for bismuth to be seen with them, because they didn't come from the Beta Kindergarten. I don't have much more to say about this, though I will say I do hope we get to see some other additional flashback to this scene at some point, because I really would like to see this scene play out without the simplified animation style that we saw for the background characters. Maybe when we see bismuth again, which I still think we're going to see Bismuth again. We'll get another look at this scene and get to see what actually happened. Mr. Sai asks, if gems can take any form that they want, why would they take the form that looks like humans? And why human females? Simply put, their base form is humanoid, which literally just means in the form of a human. Whenever they regenerate, they have to regenerate around a humanoid framework. We see it when they regenerate. It's kind of a blank doll-like shape, which appears before any of their main features start to form around it. And we already saw what happened when Amethyst tried to deviate too far away from her framework. She created unstable regenerations, which eventually failed. So they can't literally take any form. That's just an oversimplification that the show uses from time to time. They are humanoid to start out, and while we don't know why, there has to be a reason. And whatever that reason ends up being in the long run, it does limit what forms they can take. Hi AJ, you mentioned the scene where Pearl apparently scanned the trident piece, the one that Bismuth created for her, and that got me thinking. Do you think it's possible that all Crystal Gems weapons are based on actual physical weapons that they saved to their gems? Basically, the physical weapons just provide a template, and the weapon enhancements give them an alternate version of the same template. Yeah, it's definitely possible. I don't think it's the case, though. The way weapon summoning has been described in the show so far, by all three of the main crystal gems, you can kind of boil it down to weapon summoning being a very personal thing. You have to discover what your weapon is from within yourself. That is not something you have any kind of choice over at all, and if you got to scan a weapon and then base your weapon off of that, that would kind of negate that. Also, I can't think of any real-world weapons that have the properties of the Crystal Gems weapons. Maybe they can scan a similar weapon and then build a weapon around that, build a more specialized, more powerful weapon around it with those specific properties, but if that were the case, they could just modify their weapons to be tridents, or whips with spikes on them, or gauntlets with spikes on them. They wouldn't need a weapon enhancement to do that for them because they're already enhancing the concept of the weapon to begin with. So at the end of the day, while I do think, yes, it's probably possible, I just don't think the show supports it being what happened, if that makes any sense. Do you think we will ever see White Diamond in the series, and if so, what do you think the context will be? How do you think she would react to the current Earth situation? What do you think her relationship with the other diamonds would be like? I imagine was how that was supposed to end. Love your vids. Thank you very much. Yeah, I do. I think it'll be once this story arc, the current story arc with Blue and Yellow is kind of played out. I think they will go to her, or she'll come to Earth to check up on them, and as some extension of that happening, we'll see her finally. I think she's probably going to be kind of cold and distant, and also larger than Blue or Yellow, and they're going to be intimidated by her. I think she also probably wields so much power that while the situation on Earth, the current situation overall, is going to be annoying to her, it won't actually upset her. She'll remain very detached from it. But I imagine she also probably remains very detached from things like disposing of people who disappoint her, hence why Blue and Yellow might not appreciate it once she comes into the story. This is mostly just speculation, though, just me guessing based on the way I feel like the story is going to go. I could be completely wrong, and her personality could be completely different from what I think. There's really no way to know, because we literally know nothing about this character except that she exists. Hillary asks, do you think the gem worship being hand-shaped and the cluster gem prototypes commonly taking the form of hands are related in any way? It got me thinking about how gem spaceships might be powered. If your implication is that the ships are powered by actual gems, I'm sorry, but that just doesn't line up with what we see in the show. Remember, the crystal gems were so shocked by the idea that the gem powering Lapis's mirror was a sentient gem that they were visibly shocked by it. Not to mention that when you can grow gems which double as batteries, it doesn't make sense to use teeny tiny little gems to power a huge spaceship. They most likely use something more akin to the crystal heart that's in the temple, for example. And in fact, we do see something similar to that on Peridot's ship. It was when Jasper and Garnet were fighting. Garnet threw Jasper into it and broke it, and that's what ended up destroying the ship. I think that was the ship's power source. As for whether or not it's meaningful that they're in the shape of hands and cluster gem prototypes also commonly take the form of hands, I think it's more just symbolism. It's the kind of symbolism that the crew likes, and so they just keep reusing it. I don't actually think it has any meaning in the context of the show's universe. And that's actually going to be all of these that I do for today. As I said before, I do intend to start making these videos more often, so I don't want to lose my entire backlog. Remember, if you guys do have a question you'd like to ask me, you can head over to my Tumblr, or my new Discord, link in the description, or the email account I have specifically set up for these videos, ajqna@gmail.com. Either way, until next time, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.